Hi, for everyone's benefit, just in case there's any miscommunication about what items are on the agenda, we have two items on tonight's agenda. One is an amendment to the subdivision bylaw, and the second is regarding zoning reform. I think we had an indication that someone might be here for a plan amendment and a rezoning for property elsewhere in the city. That item is not before PAC at this point. It's still going through a process at council. So we just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that before we get going.
I was going to kind of wait for Terry, but Terry's always late, so. There he is. All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the meeting for the Planning Advisory Committee for November, what is it, 26th. My name is Brad Mitchell, and I'm the chair of the Planning Advisory Committee. I'll start the meeting by giving a brief overview of what the Planning Advisory Committee's mandate is, as well as a breakdown of how the meeting will progress. Tonight's meeting will be a little different with just the two items in regards to amendments and reform. Shortly the committee will vote to adopt the agenda. Following the adoption of the agenda, we'll do a roll call. We'll go through this evening's two applications. For each item, city staff will provide an overview. And once the staff have finished, then we'll open it for the public to make comments, and the committee will ask questions. They will close that public portion, and after that, we'll have a committee make recommendations and questions. Remind everybody that this is a safe space, and we ask it for everybody to conduct themselves in a respectful manner. Should anyone interrupting the proceedings will receive one warning to refrain from disrupting the meeting. Should disruptions continue, they will be asked to leave the meeting. Members of the public, you are welcome to remain in the chambers to listen to the debate and the decision of the committee. However, when your item is concluded, you may leave. Should you have any follow-up questions, please contact city staff. I will just reiterate what Jennifer just said. The two items on tonight's agenda are the Housing Accelerator Fund subdivision bylaw and the HAF zoning bylaw reform. So these are the two kind of cleanup items that we're dealing with tonight. So tonight, I'll start by looking for a motion for the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Move that.
Motion and second it. Any question? All those in favor? Thank you. The roll call. I'm the chair, Brad Mitchell. The first chair is Matthew Deleuze. Second is Ann McShane. Councillor Jerry Lowe. Councillor Gary Sullivan is not here this evening. Peter Pappas. Ashia. Phil Como. And Terry Hutchinson. Thank you. Asking for any declaration of conflict of interest in tonight's proceedings? No. Okay, so the first item is 5.1. It's an initiative. I'm going to read it off this instead of the applicant is City of St. John subdivision bylaw amendment. The Community Planning Act authorizes the Planning Advisory Committee to give its views to Common Council with respect to adoption or an amendment to subdivision bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a city-initiated application to amend our subdivision bylaw to bring forward some amendments associated with the Housing Accelerator Fund. They focus on land for public purposes, and they have two initiatives. One is to streamline the assent for money in lieu of land for public purposes, and what we're proposing there is a set of criteria that once council signs off on that criteria, it would allow staff to basically grant the assent without taking a report to council. The second is more of an administrative amendment with respect to pedestrian walkways and the Trails and Bikeways Strategic Plan and the subsequent adoption of our Transportation Master Plan, MOVE SJ. In terms of money in lieu of LPP, Most of the applications that we deal with respect to subdivisions involve taking money in lieu of LPP instead of land. When we did the Parks and Recreation Strategic Plan, also known as Play SJ, probably about it was over 10 years ago now, what it found is we had an oversupply of land. So when we crafted the subdivision bylaw in 2016, preference was given to take money in lieu. Although the option still exists through a variance if there's a strategic case, or if we're dealing with a large greenfield subdivision where we may need extra parkland, that can be pursued through a variance. Council assent is required for each of those land or money in lieu applications. So what we've done as staff is we've developed a set of criteria to basically incorporate into the bylaw to come up with a predetermined assent for money in lieu. So what that would do is anytime we get a subdivision application that meets that criteria, it wouldn't have to come to council through a council report for an individual assent for that application. In terms of the proposed criteria, there's actually 4 criteria. The first one is that there's no requirement for land identified by staff. So a lot of these subdivisions are 1 or 2 lots, often along an existing public street or existing private access. So it's somebody that has an exceptionally large lot. They may carve off 2 parcels, oftentimes for a family member, or they may have a large lot. They may just split it in half and then sell off the other portion of the lot for a new build. So what we would do is we would look at the application. Case and instance where we might see a need for land is if somebody is doing a development adjacent to a city park where we may need more land. In that case, we would flag that to go through the process and get the necessary assents for land through PAC and council. Also, if the subdivision isn't subject to a past council resolution where council has given us as staff direction to take either money or land, in those cases, that past council resolution would still prevail, so we would concur with council's previous direction on that. Also, we would look at lots that would have to abut a public street or private access. Anything large where we're creating a new public street, that has to go to council anyway in PAC for the assent to the public street. So there's no time saving there if a public street is involved. And also we selected, fewer than 5 lots is a threshold for the size and magnitude of the land being subdivided. And what that will do is that will reduce approval timelines for residential lots. The majority of these instances are folks that are, subdividing a property for a new dwelling unit or a new semi-detached dwelling. So that would, save anywhere from, it could be upwards of 4 to 6 weeks off of their approval time and get folks into the ground that much sooner with their building project. The other area that we're looking at is pedestrian walkways. Currently, the bylaw requires the dedication of land as a pedestrian walkway for 2 instances. The first would be a cul-de-sac. So around that bulb area of the cul-de-sac, oftentimes you have a pedestrian walkway that would link to adjacent lands to basically provide a continuous trail. So if somebody walks in, wanted to continue on to the next cul-de-sac over, they would have a way to do that, or to the next neighborhood. If you go out some areas of Forest Hills or Milledgeville in around M. Gerald Teed School, there's actually some mid-block, walkways as well that, help to serve that function. Those would still be required. The area that we're changing is the active transportation infrastructure that's identified in the Trails and Bikeways Strategic Plan. That was created and adopted back in 2010, 2011, prior to the city's municipal plan. So the trail network that was identified in the Trails and Bikeways Strategic Plan, it's pretty extensive, and it goes beyond kind of the area that was delineated in Plan SJ as being the focus of our growth over the next 25 years. So what we're saying is we're basically saying take those sections out that require those trails on the Trails and Bikeways Master Plan to be dedicated. Take that section out, because what we've seen happen is that when we've adopted Move SJ, we're taking a different approach to pedestrian and active transportation in the city. and it better aligns with our municipal plan. Currently, you know, and since that time, there have been changes in how we deal with active transportation infrastructure. You know, we're going with a lot more cycleways on streets like we see in University Avenue. Our recent reconstruction of Charlotte Street incorporates infrastructure there. You know, and so through processes like that, you know, we're getting away from the off-road trails. Now, if somebody were to come in with a large-scale subdivision and we thought, you know, there would be a good idea, you know, to have a trail or to have some land, you know, along a shoreline of a lake or a watercourse, you know, that could be accommodated through the variance process and PAC and council. In terms of engagement on this one, public notice isn't required under the Community Planning Act for this application. And staff's recommendation is to adopt the proposed amendment as outlined in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Do committee members have any questions for staff on this? Will you open this to public? So at this point, if anybody from the public would like to speak on this proposal, please come forward. State your name.
Yes, Rick Turner. I didn't write anything in on the subdivision aspect of this evening. I did on the zoning. What I do like about this, and I think a lot of people are going to like it, is a streamlining timeframes. Something that takes 4 to 6 weeks out of a process, that's going to be welcomed, not just by developers, the community at large, because time is everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak on this? Second call. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? Third and final call. At this point, we'll close public hearing, and I'll open it up for committee if they have questions or recommendations. Hello. Any questions, recommendations? Bill?
Yeah, I'll move staff recommendations.
Motion, Phil Como. Do I have a seconder? Terry Hutchinson. Any question? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That's it for item 5.1. 5.2, zoning bylaw. One moment here. Should we get this ready? Applicant is the City of St. John. Application type is zoning bylaw amendment. Community Planning Act authorizes the Planning Advisory Committee to give its views to Common Council concerning proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw. Common Council will consider the committee's recommendation at a public hearing on Monday, December 16th, 2024. And who's speaking on this?
You're turning it over to me first.
Okay, I'm turning it over to Jennifer.
So I will just introduce the presenters that we do have here this evening on behalf of the applicant. So we do have 2 presentations, the first being by our consulting firm and the second by city staff. So I'll introduce Jamie Burke. Jamie has been working with the Stantec consulting firm on behalf of the city to assist administration in preparing these a series of amendments that you have before us. He'll give us an initial presentation, and then after that, we will turn it over to Yeva Matson and Pankaj Navald, who will give a bit more detail and the local perspective on this. So Jamie, if you'd like to come up.
Thank you, and good evening, Mr. Chairman and PAC members. It's a pleasure to be here. I was here just a couple of weeks ago doing our open house, which we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. But before we start, I just want to, applaud the planning staff and planning team, and Carrie and Pankaj and Yeva and the rest of the staff who have assisted with this from the onset. I haven't seen a bylaw amendment this big before, I don't think. We've got a lot of amendments. It's bold and aggressive and cutting edge with some of the leading cities in Canada. So I think we, our company certainly applauds the efforts up to this point. So this is the same, I guess, rundown we did at the open house a few weeks ago. So we're just going to do a little overview of who we are at Stantec, so people know us. Some of you may, some of you may not. Talk a little bit about our role in the project, of what we've been up to, and then we'll get into some of the details of the work that we've been doing with the city. So our company has a strong position that when we start speaking in an unfamiliar setting, we always start with a safety moment. When we were at the Crown Plaza a few weeks ago, we talked about AED machines and defibrillators tonight, because given that the holidays are just around the corner. Just a quick reminder to people to check the batteries in your smoke detectors. It is that time of year where we have lots of things plugged in. Artificial trees, real trees, lots of lights, lots of candles. So just a reminder to check the batteries in your smoke detector. And I know that's a sentiment that's echoed by emergency response personnel. So a little bit about who we are. So we're a large company. This is our company slogan. With every community, we redefine what's possible. Freshly branded, but more importantly, I guess we're a Canadian company founded in 1954, headquartered in Edmonton. We have over 400 offices around the world. We're publicly traded in New York and Toronto. And even though we're proud to say we have offices around the world, we also have a local presence right here in St. John. We also have offices in Moncton and Fredericton, as well as Halifax, Charlottetown, Sydney, and St. John's, Newfoundland. So we have a wide variety of professionals, environmental professionals, lots of engineers, urban planners like myself, and we're happy to work and improve the communities that we live in. So just a quick snapshot of where we are worldwide. So we have lots of expertise that we can bring in on occasion, whether it's coastal erosion, geotechnical engineering, et cetera. It's one of the things we're very proud of. So for me personally, I'm the project manager on behalf of the company for this particular job. I'm an urban planner by trade. I'm the Atlantic lead for urban planning with Stantec and a project manager. I spent the first 18, almost 19 years of my career in the public sector. So doing lots of things that your planning staff are doing, and then moved to the private sector in January 2023. So I don't know how long you can say that you're new. My 2-year anniversary will be in January. So I think that time has run out, but certainly respect the work that our public sector employees and our volunteers who are on PACs and the important work that you all do. So specifically what we've been doing, we've been given, the way we described it, I guess, is giving the city a bit of extra horsepower. I mean, we know how busy things are here in St. John, the city of Moncton, the city of Fredericton, everybody's busy, we get that. And then the housing accelerator funding and commitments on top of that have increased the productivity and expectations of local planning staff. So many municipalities are looking for outside help through a variety of consultants to help them with bits and pieces of their either a specific project under an action fund like the half funding, or it could be just to provide some additional planning assistance for secondary planning, planning support, you name it. So I don't think I'm saying anything that you don't know on this slide. So this is the zoning bylaw provides regulations to local governments for the development and use of land, which is what you as a committee of council have authority under the Community Planning Act to make certain decisions. And those regulations include a variety of tools and documents, from land use types to building types, building heights, setbacks, and other urban planning factors, which Mr. Reed alluded to just moments ago with the first item of business. This particular application is looking to introduce what I would say a significant amount of reform into your current zoning bylaw, and that's okay. The legislation sets out, there's a process to go through when municipalities change documents. And the Community Planning Act envisions that, right? Communities grow and change and they evolve. And for years, we've seen population decline throughout Atlantic Canada. Now we're seeing exceptional population growth for a variety of reasons. And that changes things, right? We know that's done for housing affordability and availability. And that's one of the reasons why these amendments are before the PAC tonight. So the purpose of the reform process and the amendment that you have in front of you, that you have in front of you, are to address current needs. They will promote sustainable development. They will increase housing availability and certainly adapt to changes in growth and development here in the city. So we've looked at what other cities are doing. We've looked at residential density, building heights, lot sizes, setbacks, landscaping and amenity, and importantly, parking. There's been lots of changes to parking requirements over the years. And we looked specifically at HRM or Halifax, Edmonton, Calgary, Kitchener, Hamilton, as well as others like Summerside, Revelstoke, and several others who are going through similar types of processes. So what did we find? I mean, it's clear across the board, it's clear across Canada that we need more housing options. If anybody has an aging parent or family member and they want to transition out of an existing single-family dwelling, we know how difficult it is to find housing. If you're a single mom or a single dad, how difficult it is to find housing. If you're a single mom or single dad with pets, that also complicates things. So we know there's a need for housing choices. There's a variety of approaches to do this, and there's no one size fits all solution. Every community has different lot fabrics. Every community has different pieces of legislation that they have to work with. So the scale of development is different. So you can't just say we're going to do exactly what Calgary, Edmonton did, and we're going to impose that in our community. It needs to be customized for the particular community. But generally speaking, overall, there were several observations that line up through the jurisdictional scan that we've completed, which you have, and those are summarized in 6 points. Starting with 4 units are observed in all cities, and that's a standard requirement under the Housing Accelerator funding. Those agreements mandate that communities are going to make those changes, which is part of the reason why this amendment is in front of you tonight. Also, most cities permit up to 6 units in strategic areas as an effort to meet housing needs. All of them have moved to small lot sizes, some of them very small, some of them kind of in between, and all have moved to reduced setbacks. So we're looking at reduced frontage requirements, side yard setbacks, front yard setbacks, rear yard setbacks, and providing a bigger envelope in order to provide more creativity into the building market to allow people to do more things, which we'll talk about in a moment. Most have reduced parking requirements. Generally, we're seeing the increased density in the 3 to 6 height range. That tends to be the sweet spot. And a major move in what we refer to as ADUs or accessory dwelling units in addition to garden suites as a way to introduce kind of a gentle approach to density to find that missing middle piece, which I know the St. John team is going to talk about here shortly. So a little bit of detail about the changes. There's a big push to move to and promote accessory dwelling units. And we see these in 2 specific forms, secondary suites, which are generally an additional dwelling unit within the primary residence. You can see some of the images of, how that can be carved out or converted within an existing home or even a new build. And then secondly is the garden suites or backyard suites, which are a detached building, typically in the back or rear of the property. And it can be a whole standalone property. It could be above a garage. And it just provides that second unit on an existing lot. The other big move is, why a minimum of 4 dwelling units? And we've seen this consistent across the country. And you can see the image on the right-hand side of the screen is from the province of British Columbia, who's done a lot to promote how these conversions can be carried out in a 1, 2, or other configuration, which you can see depicted in the light green and dark green images. But generally speaking, 4 units is seen as a way to introduce more housing, so increasing the options that are available to community members, as I said earlier, whether you're a senior or whether you're a student. It's meant to be affordable and help stabilize prices. So if you're having trouble getting into the housing market, having an accessory dwelling unit or garden suite can introduce a second income, which allows you to be able to afford that mortgage that was a bit out of reach at the onset. It uses land more efficiently. It diversifies our communities. It can support businesses in transit when it's located in key locations, which you've probably seen in the package tonight as part of the intent with some of the amendments tonight. and introduce flexibility to some owners and developers to give some development options, and for a variety of urban planning reasons, right? We're always trying to create, walkable neighborhoods, and that's one of the intents of this is to put people in the right location. And then similarly, why a minimum of 6 units in some areas? And they're again very similar reasoning. It's meant to address the housing shortage first and foremost. But again, it's about affordability, efficiency of land use, sustainability, and providing those economic and social boosts to help transit corridors, businesses in key locations and employment areas, but also promoting predictability, which the development community wants to see, right? A lot of times they want to take the guesswork out and reduce the risk. So by allowing those 6 units, it gives them that option right from the get-go. They don't need, there's no guesswork. So you can see 2 of the potential lot configurations on the right-hand side. The first would be one lot with 5 units, so 4 in the main building and 1 in that detached garden suite. And then the one at the bottom of the image would be 6 units, 3 up, 3 down, just a potential configuration. So we're certainly not expecting to see that, those big, bulky, massive massed buildings that a lot of people envision when they think about added density. We're talking about gentle increases in residential opportunities. So how are these going to be implemented? You're going to see a slide here on the next one that kind of breaks it down and shows the changes very specifically. But in terms of more housing, so this suggested this be broken up into 2 main zones. So your R1, R2, and RSS zone would get collapsed into the RL, so your residential low density zone. So in that, it would be 4 units as of right, wherever any of those zones currently appear. Or if you're in an identified intensification area, that's where you can go up to 6. So you can go up to 6, but you're still capped at 3 stories. So again, the lot standards are meant to shrink to introduce some flexibility into the options to allow those 6 units to be carried out either in a new build or in a conversion. And again, it's up to 6. It doesn't mean everybody's going to build 6 units. It depends on the size of the lot. It depends on the existing building that you may be working with and looking at carving. There's all kinds of questions that come into the situation. From an affordability perspective, a major reduction in lot sizes, taking the minimum lot size from 550 down to 225 square meters for a 1-unit dwelling. So that's a major reduction. And sticking to affordability, efficiency, also reducing the minimum lot frontages from 7.5 to 18, from 18 meters, to 7.5 meters in the RL zone. So again, reducing that amount of area that if you wanted to subdivide and either sell or build on a different lot, that gives you some flexibility to now explore those options. And again, it doesn't mean everybody's going to do it. It's just an option, introducing some flexibility into your zoning bylaw. Also, one of the major changes is in the RM zone, bumping the minimum height up to 6 stories or 21 meters. So we tend to see the development community kind of looking to get to that, 6-story max. Lots of variances across New Brunswick about looking to increase those height requirements, and several municipalities looking to do similar type of changes. Flexibility for owners, reducing the size of multiple unit dwellings down from 690 to 75 square meters. So again, allowing for more flexible development, and consolidating the design regulations now all in one spot. So part of this is to make the process more streamlined and more easy to understand, so that people aren't necessarily having to flip between multiple sections of a document to figure out what they can and cannot do, which is part of the efforts to make development more user-friendly. Development regulations, more user-friendly. So this is the general comparison of the major changes. You can see your RL zone on the right, which is the cumulative of your R1, your R2, and your RSS. And then you've got your RL within an intensification area. So along those key corridors, and then your existing RM zone on the right-hand side of the table. So you can see that we've, we've tried to summarize the major changes. So, 4 units as of right, 6 units as of right, only in an intensification area. And that RM zone is where your higher density uses are permitted. The major difference between the 3 is your 4 to 6 units in the RL zone, depending on where you are, and then similarly bumping the minimum height up to 6 stories or 21 meters in the RM zone. But aside from that, the lot standards are consistent across the two. Some of the other changes mainly around parking. So if you're outside intensification area, you're still having to provide 1 parking spot per unit, although tandem parking is going to be permitted, so one behind the other to save some space. That doesn't mean that somebody may not want to do 2 cars side by side. Again, it's about introducing some flexibility into the design requirements. In intensification areas, parking will be exempt for a secondary suite or garden suite if you're within 400 meters of employment area, post-secondary education institution, or transit route. So again, giving people a bit of a break where somebody would be, in theory, be able to walk to an alternative mode of transport or to amenity spaces. And in the RM zone, a major change would be introducing parking variances where they may be considered, subject to the submission of a parking study. So if somebody were to come in and make the case that building is going to be marketed to a certain demographic, or you're in close proximity to X, Y, and Z, they'll have to lay that out in very logical and justifiable terms. Then a variance may be entertained in order to reduce the minimum parking requirement because you're within a location that provides alternative modes of transportation. And then lastly, you can see that the second row from the bottom refers to amenity space requirements. So if you're in the existing RL zone or your R1, R2, or RSS, which are the current zoning, if you're in those areas, there's no amenity space requirement. But if you move to an intensification area, there's an introduction of 7.5 square meters for each dwelling unit, where you get beyond 6 dwelling units. So again, that bit of an economy of scale, and that could be on the roof, that could be outside, that could be in the building. There's some flexibility into where that amenity space can be provided. And of course, the bigger the building, the more, options there are, where you go to rooftop patios and things of that nature. And the same implies for the RM zone. And then just lastly, the bumping the lot occupancy, or what many jurisdictions refer to as lot coverage, up from 50% to 60%. So meaning that the footprint of your building can occupy 60% of your lot. So again, that provides more options to undertake some of these conversions in order to convert an existing dwelling into something that may be a bit different with one or more units. So overall, this is the development goal, is how this could look. You could have your more traditional kind of apartment block, which you see on the right hand side of the image, but you can also have townhouses. But you could also have basement suites in existing houses, or you could have a small townhouse with some basement apartments. So I guess the idea is that we wouldn't expect to see the same thing on every property. Again, it all depends on lot fabric, what a current landowner or a potential property owner has to work with in terms of the ground they have available or the structure that they have available. But again, it's meant to be flexible, which is what the Housing Accelerator funding was meant to do. Provide options in the zoning bylaw to allow increases in density to help fill that missing middle housing. So that's really anything above your single unit up to your apartment building. So you think about semi-detached duplexes, small townhouses, or fourplex. So just I guess a quick summary of the public engagement that's been carried out. I believe you have a copy of the What We Heard document in your packages, but the city's had two open houses, one to kind of kick off the project and one 2 weeks ago where, we set up you can see some images here that are from the open house at the Crown Plaza, where we had some display boards out to explain what was happening, trying to be as transparent as we could to help people visualize what these changes can mean, to give them some comfort. And the Shape Your City platform is ongoing. That's facilitating public participation and transparency, and we're integrating the comments that we receive into the What We Heard document, which will be presented to council as well. So some key comments and inquiries from the open house, concerns about, housing affordability, that things are expensive, so welcoming the option to potentially introduce some changes. But also some comments on infrastructure capacity, particularly with a garden suite. How will they be serviced? Am I going to get two utility bills as opposed to one? So there's still some educational elements that need to go with this as this moves on through the adoption process and into implementation. Interest in reducing parking requirements even more. We heard that from several people in attendance. And also some, kind of flags about enhancing emergency access, about, how will emergency responders kind of get around property for reducing some of these setbacks? So, all great questions, and we encourage people, there's no silly questions. This is the time to get them to the floor to make sure that the team doesn't miss anything. And, a common, observation that we get when we're going through planning processes is that, some suggestions for additional communication, right? And we understand that it's difficult to reach everybody, particularly seniors. We know, not everybody's active on social media. But I think the city's done an extremely good job trying to get the word out about this process and the importance of it, and trying to generally, educate people about, the awareness of the housing shortage and housing crisis, and the kind of the sense of responsibility to act and do something. So again, some pretty bold moves through the amendments that you have. So next steps would be the public hearing scheduled for December 16th with Common Council, and if everything goes according to plan, we'd be looking at adoption of the new zoning provisions in say Q1 2025, as early as January.
Thank you very much.
So, Mr. Chairman, that's it for me. I'm not sure what the transition is here, but
I would say it probably would be best we move into staff and then open it up to questions if there are any initial ones, and then we can open the public component.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of PAC. My name is Pankaj Nalavde. I am the Director of Planning and Housing here at the City of St. John. I am going to present on the staff side of the presentation. I will cover a bit of background on the HAF initiative, the Housing Accelerator Fund initiative, which is driving this project, give you a little bit of more background on what our zoning bylaw structure is today, and then dive into some of the proposed details. There will be some repetition between what our consultant covered and what I'm going to cover going forward, but it's an opportunity to maybe listen from a different perspective and from my explanation. This is a tag team presentation between me and my colleague, Yeva Matson. We also have our Housing Accelerator Fund project manager, Carrie Smith, in attendance this evening. So diving right in. In spring 2023, Government of Canada launched the Housing Accelerator Fund to support local governments in creating transformational changes to boost housing supply. In January 2024, the City of St. John received funding to implement its own Housing Accelerator Fund action plan, which included 8 initiatives as seen on the screen. All of them are intended to accelerate, remove barriers, and boost housing supply. This evening, staff have brought forward initiative number 8, zoning bylaw reform, which really focuses on unlocking regulatory barriers that can slow down housing supply and make housing expensive. The zoning bylaw reform initiative aims to remove barriers and promote diverse housing options. To achieve this, under the program, the city must implement several key amendments to the zoning bylaw regulations, which include allowing up to 4 units by right on all serviced lots, allowing up to 6 units by right on all lots that are located within intensification areas, increasing the permitted height in mid-rise residential zones, those are really our medium density apartment zones, to 6 stories, encouraging higher density near post-secondary institutions and primary transit corridors, and permitting garden and secondary suites in all residential zones. These amendments are required to comply with the HAF program and must be adopted and in effect by February 2025. So the city's zoning bylaw currently divides the residential areas into 11 districts. So those are all the districts in front of you. I think it's too small a font, but I think the point is these districts are spread across the urban service area, also known as the primary development area, and then the broader unserviced rural areas. The proposed amendments primarily affect 5 residential districts, which are all in the primary development area. These districts are serviced and represent the main focus of our development efforts. This is where we expect most of our development to take place. For this amendment, we are consolidating the R1, R2, RSS, and the RL district into a single comprehensive zone or a category called as the low-rise residential zone. Another category, RM, represents the mid-rise medium density category, and that's kind of to the left of that blue line there. It is also worth noting there are 2 other zones, the RH, which is the high density zone, and the RC, which is urban center residential zone. These are also located within the PDA. These apply to areas like the North End or to the Uptown, but these areas we already promote and support a diversity of housing typologies. So these changes are not really applicable, or they already permit what we are trying to promote in other places. So our objective for the low-rise residential zones are twofold. One is promoting diversity and accessibility, and that is through encouraging a variety of housing forms in residential neighborhoods. Secondly, to eliminate exclusionary zoning, which really means moving away from the way we have done our neighborhoods previously, where just a single typology fills the whole subdivision. We want to support more than one typology of zone. And promoting missing middle options. And missing middle really means all forms of ground-oriented housing options where the house has direct access from the ground. And that can be a semi-detached home, that can be a duplex, that can be a row house. So promoting a diversity of these forms in these neighborhoods. The second, the more administrative side of things, is reducing administrative barriers, simplifying zoning by reducing the number of districts that allow similar uses. So while we are tasked with allowing more than 4 units on a lot, our districts, which currently support 1 unit, 2 units, 3 units, are essentially redundant. They would be offering the same use value. So we want to move away from people having to rezone to go from one district to another, and reduce all that red tape and expense that people have to go through. So minimizing the need for these costly rezoning applications and transitioning from single detached to row houses, for example. Reducing our reliance on Section 59 conditions. We've been introducing a lot of Section 59 conditions on a case-by-case basis. We want to make sure that these are standardized so that they're on a principle based. Landscaping comes in where we have to buffer between one use and a more intense form of use. So if we shouldn't have to constantly condition them, they almost become principles and part of the zoning districts. We believe reducing and all these changes will streamline the approval process and reduce the timelines and the cost to go through a rezoning exercise. If you want to develop one of the missing middle or low-rise forms of housing, you should be able to go straight to permitting. So to support this goal of allowing 4 to 6 units on a residential, we no longer need multiple districts dedicated to 1 or 2 unit developments. So our first significant step is really the consolidation of all those 4 districts into one low-rise residential zone, which will allow all previously permitted residential uses within one district. So we really aren't taking away development opportunities. We are consolidating all of them in one comprehensive zone. Another key objective is to ensure efficient use of land, which can directly contribute to the affordability of housing. Our municipal plan, as a key principle, talks about infilling our city. We have a large city geographically with services spread out, and our objective is to really find as many infill opportunities without extending this infrastructure in new areas, which adds to more cost. So this is achieved really by allowing 4 units as of right on all serviced lots, and again, permitting up to 6 units on lots within designated intensification areas. We are also reducing minimum lot size requirements. For example, we are decreasing the single detached lot size requirement from 550 meters square to 225. What can that do? You can either put a duplex or a triplex on your lot, but if you want a single detached independent house, you can take an older lot and subdivide that and accommodate a more compact form of housing going forward. So really, it's about creating more choices and options. Eliminating minimum ground floor area or building footprint area. We have regulations that call for the minimum size of a building, and that is really unnecessary. People should be free to sort of, find a reasonable fit and site coverage of their site and build to the maximum potential of their sites. Maintaining a consistent maximum height of 3 stories within that entire district, and increasing allowable lot coverage from 50 to 60%. And that just means that people will be able to build more, particularly when they have larger sites. So these changes support housing diversity, improved land utilization, and greater affordability for residents. I do want to say that I know a lot of people have anxiety about 4 units on a lot. This is about opening doors for 4 units on a lot. This is not requiring 4 units on a lot. So you might see the one dilapidated home in a subdivision that is struggling to turn over. What to do with that? How do you buy an old building and just replace it with one new? Here's an opportunity to take that site and add more density and make a viable business case and bring infill to our community. So here are some diagrams that show or translate some of the concepts we are talking about. We understand there is an anxiety about these changes leading to dramatic transformation in neighborhoods. However, it is important to emphasize that we are simply creating opportunities for a diversity of housing forms. To illustrate, we have prepared some renderings that demonstrate how gentle densification can occur. For instance, a single family home might add a second unit, such as a garden suite in the rear yard space, or a second unit as an extension to that building, making it a 2-unit home. Where previously the zoning bylaw only supported secondary suites in single detached homes, and also limited to just one secondary suite, the proposed amendment will permit a combination of a secondary suite in a basement, and that's really coming from the building code. It only recognizes one. And then a garden suite in the backyard, or a garage suite, a suite on top of a garage if the space exists. So those are your options for 2 units and 3 units. And this is a more evolved option. This example shows a duplex with secondary suite and a garden suite, illustrating the possibilities that are enabled by the proposed changes. So with the updated zoning, there are now endless permutations and combinations. Not all of them are in front of us today. I agree that. These will offer flexibility to meet those diverse needs. These examples demonstrate how changes can be implemented gradually and thoughtfully, ensuring that we maintain the character of our neighborhoods, which I know is an interesting topic at this committee, while expanding housing options to accommodate a growing and diverse population. So with regards, I think I may have missed a few slides. As it relates to the mid-rise residential, which is really our category where we support apartment-style developments, the biggest change is really increasing the height envelope, and that is really to recognize the changes that have taken place in the National Building Code. And so we are opening the doors to go straight up to 6 stories or 21 meters. There are some other changes that are taking place, which is really the amount of land required for each unit. And we are introducing some standards for that, which is 75 square meters for multi-unit dwelling, which is really the apartments. And for townhomes, previously that number used to be 180 per unit, and we are going down to 140 square meters. We are also allowing for increased lot coverage from 50 to 60%. I think I've missed a few slides. I want to go back to the low-rise zone. The low-rise zone also supports larger developments known as cluster housing or dwelling groups, as long as they are 3 stories or less on lots larger than 800 square meters. So a cluster housing or dwelling group refers to 2 or more buildings containing dwelling units located on a lot serviced by a private road that are designed as a unified development. There is an example on Rockingstone Drive in St. John and some sketches that show what are those possibilities. So this approach encourages cohesive, well-planned housing developments that align with the broader goal of efficient land use and diverse housing options. Cluster housing or dwelling groups have been a permitted use in the RL low-rise residential zone previously. So the key change really is the reduction of lot sizes, minimum lot size requirement for each of the units from 180 to 140 meters square per unit. This will allow more development of more compact and efficient cluster housing units, utilizing the land better. Other changes include reducing the requirement for continuous building length. And currently that is stipulated as 36 meters, which we think is very prescriptive. And we are just moving from 36 to 6 units. So it's more design based as opposed to a prescriptive number. So I'm going to turn over to the mid-rise zone again, where I spoke about the increase to the height requirements. So under the housing supply targets for the HAF program, we expect 70% of our new growth to come from these types of developments. Given this shift, our focus is now on improving the design and appearance of these buildings, as well as ensuring adequate amenity space allocation, which directly contributes to the quality of life of our residents. At this point, I will hand it to my colleague, planner Eva Matson, to speak to how we used to implement Section 59 conditions previously as they relate to medium density development, and what is our approach going forward.
Thank you. So I'm going to jump in now and just talk on a couple of the other sections of the bylaw we are amending. He covered the zones, and I'm going to look at some of the specific sections and some of the reasons we're doing this. So another reason for this big bylaw change was, as said, to reduce red tape, streamline these processes. And one of the big things that has been occurring over the past few years is Section 59 conditions. And these are legal conditions we've placed on the property at the time of a rezoning. Staff did some research into the most common conditions that were applied over the last 2 years, and these often included increased front yard landscaping, pedestrian connectivity, building design, and site plan requirements. So it really showed us that there was a gap in our bylaw for creating this quality development. So staff are making some recommendations here to better align with these common conditions. So we're adding new landscaping requirements for residential. We're adding some better site design requirements for pedestrian connectivity and the building design, and then we're clarifying site plan requirements. So just some kind of housekeeping amendments. So one of those sections I said we would be amending or proposing the amendments for is in the landscaping section of our bylaw. And we're just proposing to change and increase the quality of landscaping we see in residential developments. This would include better design requirements, such as like buffering between that low rise and those mid-rise zones, and would require about 30% of required front yards to be soft landscaped. When a developer creates a small scale project, such as a 1-unit dwelling, a semi-detached townhouse, anything under 6 units, we would also start requiring for a tree or 2 shrubs per unit to be planted. And then if they had a project of 6 or more, they would kind of mirror our commercial landscaping requirements and require a tree or shrub per 45 square meters of front yard. And this really just helps improve the quality of developments, and it really adds to the landscaping in our residential zones, and it kind of helps us avoid those bleak where they just mow everything down and pop a building up. Site design requirements, we're also proposing some new amendments to this section, specifically for multi-unit buildings or for residential buildings you find in a more commercial zone. It would have requirements such as entrances oriented towards the street, pedestrian connectivity between the units and either the sidewalk or parking areas, some requirements around improved design such as articulated front facades, and requiring non-residential uses to be fronted onto the front street. And this really, as again, just helps improve the quality of development and the public realm. So another big one we've talked about previously, I think both my previous speakers both touched on it, is amenity space. It's important for creating quality developments and improved living spaces. And it does only apply when creating 6 or more units. We generally assume anything under that is going to have some yard space and some decent area. So we raised our design requirements for amenity space by proposing that all amenity space be accessible and have direct access for residents. Common amenity space now has some requirements around lighting, access, some design requirements to improve the quality of that space, such as size requirements. And then staff are also proposing to increase the required amenity space per unit from 5 square meters to 7.5, and then requiring 50% of that space to be private, such as balconies or patios. Again, this is just to improve the quality of design at some of our new developments and in quality of life. So I'm going to jump into parking, which is another area staff are proposing some changes. While we haven't seen too many conditions around parking previously, there are a common variance request. So again, by making some amendments, we're reducing that red tape, we're streamlining the process, and we're clarifying it for both developers and residents. Our current standards right now are 1 stall per unit for every type of unit, except for affordable, which only requires half a stall. And then there are some current relaxations to parking in the city. You can see on this map above, those purple areas are intensification zones, and they right now only require you to have 80% of the required parking. That gray area is our uptown exemption zone, which, as said, it's exempt from parking. And I will note, though, that despite these relaxations, most developers do provide parking. So our proposed changes to the section would be, while retaining these former relaxations, like in the intensification areas, we would be lowering the requirement for affordable housing to 0 stalls per unit, with the clarification that accessible stalls will be required per accessible unit, and that you should note that affordable units must meet our definition of affordable. Nobody can just come in and say it will be if they don't meet that definition. We're also recommending secondary and garden suites be separated from that regular dwelling unit parking requirement, and instead from 1 stall go down to half a stall per unit. And we would also clarify in the bylaw that tandem parking stalls are allowed, and going forward, if people would want to have a variance for their parking, they would be required to provide a parking study. Once again, this just really increases clarity, adds some flexibility, and encourages more housing. And our final proposal for the parking would be specifically when a development exists within 400 meters of an intensification area, an employment area, a primary corridor, or post-secondary institute, or a dedicated transit stop, which are largely outlined in that map above. The intensification areas are very visible. That's where most of our employment areas are. And then the red lines would be our primary corridors. Whenever a unit is within about 400 meters of this, we would remove the requirement for a parking stall for a secondary or garden suite completely, so down to 0. And then we would add a relaxation in the RL zone to waive 1 parking stall when 4 units are proposed, and then 2 stalls could be waived when 6 units are proposed. Again, it's all about flexibility, encouraging more housing, and also encouraging things such as active transportation and transit. So here's some maps. These are just some quick visuals for the benefit of anybody here. These were created so you could see the zone changes across the city. This first map here is you can see the mid-rise zone where it is. And this is the one that would see those changes from height increase from 4 to 6 stories. They are also around the room, and we have some out, and they are on our Shape Your City page. So this map shows where our RSS, which is the suburban residential, our R1, 1 unit, and our R2, 2 unit, and then all the current low-rise apartments or zones are, and these would all be consolidated into that new consolidated low-rise zone. The yellow on the map represents where those 4 units by right would be allowed, and then the orange represents where that 6 unit is, which is inside those intensification areas again, or where there is already an existing RL lot. And then just a final map showing every property that would be affected by these changes across the city. As said, these are available on Shape Your City. If anyone wants to take a closer look, you can download them, zoom in. And of course, you can always contact city staff if you want to know if your property is in there. Public engagement was a large component of our project, and I believe our consultant from Stantec, Jamie, did touch on this. Our Shape Your City page has been live since September, has all the materials on it, including the background reports, what we heard reports, proposed zoning amendments, questions and answers. Everything you can think of will be on that website if you want to take a closer look. We did host a kickoff event on September 25th, and then a second open house on November 7th. We've advertised today's PAC in the public hearings. Our communications team has been great. They've been helping us advertise these events through social media, PSAs. It's been shared with council to share on their social media pages and some radio announcements. And then our legal notice was posted on the city website yesterday on November 25th. We have received 10 letters regarding the zoning amendments. 8 letters have been in support and 2 in opposition. So just a really quick touch on those kind of questions and concerns we've seen kind of from the public and from the letters we've received. There's been concerns about the extent of change. And while these seem like a large change, it affects a lot of properties, it is just a gentle density increase, and it would be seen very incrementally. It's very unlikely people are going to start coming in, knocking down existing homes to make these bigger units. It's going to be very incremental, slow. It's going to be seeing those garden suites in the backyard, or maybe an in-law suite or a small addition. Currently, a lot of the large majority of existing homes in the city could convert by right now to 6 units under our Converted Accommodations Act, which allows for an older 1 or 2 unit home before 1967 to be converted to 6 units. So there already have been cases like this. We're just kind of making it a more consolidated, clarified change. There has been some concerns about neighborhood character as well, and as said, this will be incremental change. And with other amendments around landscaping, site design, parking, all that, you're going to see some more quality development. And it just has the benefit of allowing the conversion of existing structures. So you're not going to see a lot of visible change right off the bat. And then we did have some questions about energy efficiency from a couple of architects in town. And of course, city's always concerned about energy efficiency and making sure we're meeting the net zero requirements and such. But we do have to balance that with a good quality design and apartments that contribute to a quality of life. And then I'm going to just address the final one of why we're doing this. And I think the 2 people before me have also reiterated this, that this is just a way to create flexible and diverse housing options, which can help with things such as aging in place. It allows for incremental and strategic change, and it creates quality development, which encourages affordable housing as well. And it does really reduce that red tape and streamline the processes by reducing the need for rezonings, reducing those Section 59 conditions, and just clarifying everything for both residents and developers. So I think I will leave it at that. As stated, the entire purpose of these amendments is just to increase choice and affordability. We're really not forcing change. You can still build a single family home in every one of our residential districts, but it just gives us that flexibility and diversity of housing and build form. So thank you.
Yep, got me, Colleen. So at this point, we'll open the meeting to public. If anybody from the public would like to speak on this matter, please come forward and state your name.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, Rick Turner. I did send in a one-pager, which when I sat down and started looking at this stuff, I was almost ready to send in a book. All in favor. The RLL zone. What I see here, we've got a lot of instances where people have a home, they have a family, that family, extended family, tries to find a place to rent, they can't afford one. They look at houses, can't afford them. I see that's where some of this take-up's going to come in the RL zone. And there's problems in our community that's certainly going to help. And I understand the gentle density. Not everyone's going to rush out and do that, but it's going to give people an opportunity to contribute to the problem, be part of the solution. When I wrote this, one thing I put in is, okay, build, build, build. We want to keep building. What we've got to achieve is overbuilding. So you see all this stuff coming through, and you think, where are all those people going to go? Where's the take-up? Eventually, that's going to taper out. That's when there's going to be a reckoning. But those children that are living in a garage unit in the back of their family's home, okay, maybe they then have an opportunity they could actually buy a home. People who are faced with rental problems and faced with evictions, well, you know where that goes. If they can't find a place, then they become part of the homeless. So this is certainly going to help in that regard. I think the RLL zone, I really like what I see there. The big problem in our community right now is homelessness. And if we don't get costs down, don't get some way to cycle some of these people back into living quarters, I mean, let's face it, that's a real scar on our community as it is with communities all the way across the country. So I won't go into the RL any further, but on the RM, I didn't write anything in on it. All I can say is those changes, I've been wondering when they changed some of the building code to allow 6-story wood frame buildings. And it was always my thought, well, we only allow the 3, then you have to call it a high rise, and as soon as you call it high rise, everyone in the community gets up in arms. Well, the 6 stories, wood frame, everything fits. So I support staff's proposal. I compliment them. I compliment the gentleman from Stantec, what he's put into this as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Is there anybody else that would like to speak for or against this proposal for change? Please state your name.
My name's Andrea St. Pierre. I'm a registered nurse and I am a licensed counseling therapist. I own 2 properties in the city of St. John, and listening to this, I'm really glad I did attend. My real reason for attending this meeting was my concern of putting tiny homes on Rossay Avenue in Westmoreland, Sunny Ridge Homes. I understand greatly of the homelessness. I have a brother that's actually homeless right now, but it is related to mental health and drug addiction. Now, watching all of this, I'm thinking, okay, as my own home, subdivisions, Forest Hills, Heatherway, all the different areas of the city, you have a beautiful subdivision, children playing, all that, and then all of a sudden you're going to put a 6th level right dead center in the middle. Maybe someone's got a view, like on Exmouth Street. That's when I was a kid. We had a view of the ocean. When they were building on Prince Edward Street, I was very concerned when they were doing this other developmental building. Is that going to be in our airspace, our view? So my biggest concern is how fast, because it sounds like construction makes money. The vendors are profiting on this. When you're thinking that, okay, yes, we're going to have more homes for people, are these homes going to be a $2,000 a month rent? I don't see someone building, spending this kind of money, adding 2 levels to a 4-story building or whatever, and that they're not going to be making money, and that they're going to be like, my rent's going to be $600 because I feel for the homeless and the people that are not making enough money. That's, I guess, my challenge when I'm thinking about all of this. And making a zoning law that's going to go so fast that other people aren't going to know what's going on. And as for all this media and all that, I haven't seen anything about this zoning changes that they're trying to implement, the city, whether it's the city or the staff, implementing these changes. I haven't seen anything on social media whatsoever. And I am concerned about how fast the zoning will be. I want to put a 6th level building in right there in my subdivision. And then how is it going to affect my neighbors? Then you think of the parking, it's hard for the plows, all that. There's no parking for people if you put a 6th level right in the middle of subdivision. And people even with a 1-family home already have 3 or 4 because they have their kids home now, right? I have my 25-year-old home. And so I have 3 cars. So if I'm right there in the subdivision and now I got 4 more units above me and each person has 3 cars because more kids are staying home, or the adults are moving back home with their children. That's really important. So these are my major concerns. So I wouldn't be supporting this, and the fact that there needs to be looking at, like, you can't just put a 6 unit in a residential zoning of a 1 level or 2 level home. And then the other thing is, if you're going to put housing, you need to make sure it's safe housing. You can't just put a high rise right in the middle of a subdivision and then knowing how is it going to also affect the neighbor's safety. So I guess that's my biggest thing for when you guys are thinking about this, okay? All right.
Thank you very much for your comments and for coming forward. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak for or against this proposal? If you could state your name, please.
Evening. My name is Nick Cameron. I'm a resident of Honeysuckle Drive on the west side, which is an R1 zone currently, and my home's actually adjacent to an RM, and I'm here to speak in support of the proposed amendment. I love my neighborhood. It's a great neighborhood to have a family where I live with my daughter and my wife. What I don't like about it is I want more of my friends to live there, but the price of entry now is climbed up to north of $350. It's hovering around there, which I never thought I would see in a neighborhood like that on the west side, but here we are. And so although I'm in support of a lot of what I'm seeing here in regards to the being permissive in allowing different housing types. I would like to encourage yourself, the committee, the city, and staff to dig a bit deeper and be a bit more bold on eliminating parking minimums. We hear often with these types of proposals, will it really be affordable? Or if it's market rate, what is the market rate now? Parking has a huge impact on that. It occupies a lot of the land. It's not an efficient use of land. So although we may, put in rules that would allow for things like secondary suites, if there are parking minimums, there may not be the available area to do so. Sometimes underground parking gets proposed as a solution to that. But then you're talking about an additional cost of anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 per stall for underground parking. So it can have quite an impact. So I would encourage the folks to, like I said, dig a bit deeper in on the parking minimums. Some of what I'm talking about may be a bit out of scope with this amendment. Perhaps there'd be an opportunity with sort of the denser forms or the denser zones, as well as commercial zones. I think we can look at parking minimums there. There's also some low-hanging fruit. I think when we think of areas like Main Street, there's some great infill opportunities along Main Street. But once you start to put the pieces together, parking being one of them, it starts to fall apart. But in Main Street, we have an area where if you stand there for 60 minutes, you will see 28 buses pass by. That's a bus almost every 2 minutes. So it's a very transit-rich area that we often don't think of. It's very close to having just as good a transit service as the uptown. So that'd be an area that I think could be looked at. I like what I see with the parking waiver idea, but when I think waiver, I think, a waiver of a fee going away entirely, whereas this is really just an additional reduction. So I think, something like an extension of the exemption area may be suitable there, but something to be looked into a bit further. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate it. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak forward against this proposal and change? Second time. Is there anybody from the audience that would like to speak for or against this proposal? Third and final. And we'll close the public portion and we'll open this to committee to questions for staff. I see Ann McShane, do you have a question?
Yep, I have a few. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll start with some of the easy ones first. Did we consider parking maximums as part of this? And
Through the chair, we didn't consider parking maximums. We generally see that some developers will tend to provide parking based on their understanding of their market, and it costs money. So generally, they will figure what their need is, and it's a natural cap on what they're willing to do.
yeah,
So
we
it
just
really
we just had one that was like they proposed 25% over what was required. So
Yeah.
okay, anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so we do expect some of those. If it's a upper end, rental unit in a suburban context where they expect two members of the household to have vehicles, it is possible that they will go there. But again, we are not seeing developments that are 100% like that. It might be a small 10, 20% component of it. So we haven't gone there. We've really looked at reducing the parking requirements. Our focus in many ways is on affordability. And, to those users who are maybe new to the city, are young students or immigrants who are saying, can I have housing without the burden of paying for a parking stall or a vehicle? And this is really about ensuring that place is in our zoning bylaw. So what you will see in the low-rise zones is an incremental shift, maybe 25, 30%. So that reduction of one stall for 4 units or 2 stalls for 6 units, that's our focus. It's the affordability of it.
Yeah, no, I was happy to see the parking waivers, and I was remiss in not saying that. Super excited to see the 4 and 6 units by right. I think that's something that we've been consistently having conversations about. So really happy to see a lot of the pieces of this. So great work. Was there any conversation, I guess, to Mr. Cameron's point, of expanding the parking exemption area that has been such a success uptown?
So the city is undertaking a parking study, looking at the uptown area as a case study and to see what that situation is and how do you accommodate growth. And we just want to take it step by step.
Okay.
So once we look at the outcomes of that study and discuss how to go forward, we can look at that consideration citywide. We didn't want to overwhelm the community with the series of changes everywhere. So at this point, it's an incremental step to unlock barriers for
That's-
housing
yeah,
types.
okay. Still a possibility, still in play. Okay.
And I could also add,
Yeah.
the areas where we do have the exemption area, a lot of our developers are still providing parking, and that's in the uptown where there is very robust alternative parking solutions. With other parts of our community where there are no public parking lots or maybe not the same level of transit connections, we want to make sure that we're doing this in a responsible way so that we can work with our parking staff to make sure that we're transitioning and enhancing those alternatives to help allow for it. But when we do have requests to consider parking variances, we are able to look at the context. And an additional element that has been included in this amendment is around if someone would like to do a parking variance, they can provide information and the rationale to show why their particular building or development would be a suitable one to reduce it because of proximity to transit, location, walkability, and specifics of that neighborhood.
Okay. Thanks. I'm happy to hear there's still work moving in that direction, so yay. And then the last question, I probably have more, but I'm going to stop here. It's about proximity to low-density parcels. So when I look at the consultant's report, they kind of compare different cities, and everyone has kind of different treatments of how they have setbacks with adjoining lot or with neighboring lots, and some have specific enhanced requirements in proximity to low-density parcels. We're less than than the other ones in those, and I know, but I'm really happy with the rest of kind of what we're doing with it. That's the one piece where I'm a little like, how do we ensure that we're robust enough? And Ms. Matson was just talking about, you just presented about landscaping buffers between the two density levels. Can you maybe speak to that and perhaps tell me about how that could be adequate buffering? Yeah.
So we do anticipate that there will be moments where a low-rise zone gets rezoned to a mid-rise.
Yeah.
And that speaks to some of the residents' question here, that change is not automatic. Right now, we have the map in front of you. All those orange areas are very limited. And every time that development comes forward, it comes to this place for a rezoning discussion. And that's the instance where we really want to start seeing that on a case-by-case basis, how close is that building to the rear yard. So I think our setbacks for the rear side is about 7 meters. We also expect most of our parking to go to the background. So right now, the regulations are a bit loose, but we are increasingly adding that language that parking goes behind. So you get the building, you get the parking, and now the district itself has landscaping regulations, so they're available to the development officer to implement. So we see that as creating that buffer between the low-rise building and the high-rise building, the landscaping, the parking, and then the building coming in front of that.
Is the setback of the building to the lot line in addition to the landscaping piece, or is it the same?
The building setback is from the property line. So the 7 meters is from the property line. So
And
there
the
might be
landscape
those-
is a part of that, so
Yeah,
it's not in
yeah,
addition.
no. But landscaping, that can have some trees in there. 7 meters is decent. Developers can, of course, increase that. There's also an element of ensuring the land is getting used efficiently, because when we have rear yards that are really, really large, what are you doing with it? I think that's the question. Now, developers can put an amenity space there, and that's one way to create that buffer. So it's about having that language that creates requirements to have amenity space which can go in that buffering space and whatnot. So it's all of these elements come together when we do the site design and review. But it's creating opportunities to have those tools as buffering mechanisms.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I have a few more questions, but everybody else take a turn. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of quick ones. Parking, the reducing of the parking spots, where do those numbers come from? I'm sure you just pick them out of the air. Where did they come from?
So it really, one, we looked at other cities, and increasingly cities are moving towards removing parking minimums, right? But other cities also allow tandem parking. They allow options for more than one secondary suite. So where we see that tandem parking option, that stall can support 2 secondary suites. So it was about opening, just incrementally making that one step forward. So if you have 2 secondary suites, one gets a parking relaxation, one provides that. So if you take that one stall over 2, that's 0.5 for each of them. So it's really looking at incremental opportunities to allow one more unit and reduce that parking barrier. That was our approach. And if you look at it from a number point of view, it's about 25 to 30% at this point. So we are looking at 80% relaxation in intensification areas. So it's almost wanting to extend that same sort of a discount to low-rise zones. And when it comes to the mid-rise and the parking relaxations, we haven't put a number in there. We've said that it's difficult for us to generalize that requirement. So we want to see a parking study that contextualizes where that site is. Does it have 2 major transit roads? Is it close to university? And based on that context, the applicant can demonstrate that it can work with the reduced parking requirement, and then we will give it to consideration.
Thank you. My next question is, I see some of these subdivisions are probably going to start getting densified with people. Did the city or planning take in consideration parks and green space in those areas? I can name a couple areas right now that doesn't have a park with very high density children around, and I'm just wondering if that was a consideration.
So through the chair, that is a consideration for the planning department. I think our approach is really to embark on planning for the city through secondary plans. So for the north end, we are now undertaking a master plan almost, where we look at a 7.5 kilometer square area and where we see housing, and we are going to think about which parks need to be kept, amplified, reduced, what may be. But I think the city has a different policy for the parks that currently states that we have an oversupply of park spaces that are, difficult to maintain. So our policy for the most part has been for newer subdivisions of smaller scales to just take money in lieu. But I think in the long term, as communities start to grow, it is time to rethink that approach. But secondary planning is really where you get to plan a central community space that benefits everyone, as opposed to just fragmented pieces of lands everywhere. So it is an important consideration, more to come on that. This bylaw doesn't deal with it.
Perfect, thank you. And my last one was, if somebody was going to take a new high-rise and just throw it into a subdivision like they were talking about, they still have to come through PAC in the city to make all those recommendations. It's just not going to happen, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
We are not changing low-rise zones
Right.
into medium or high-rise zones. We are just taking those districts which currently support ground plus 3-story buildings, single, the semi-detached, the duplex, the row house, and consolidating them. We are not opening, so the limit is 3-story in terms of height. And we think that is something that can work similar in terms of character. There can be diversity, and so that's all we are recommending at this point.
Perfect, thank you. That's all I have for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Phil. Peter, did you have questions?
I do, just a couple of observations.
Yep.
Through you to staff. And I'd be interested in knowing what the other areas of the country are doing with the amenity space. If you're trying to do affordable housing and you're trying to build an infill on a small lot, trying to put up 4 units, well, we're increasing that amenity space up to 7.5 square meters per unit. I mean, that sometimes can force a design change that doesn't even work on a tiny lot. So I'm wondering is this a number that you've come up with that you've identified across the country that municipalities are switching to?
Yeah. So we did look at a number of municipalities. Edmonton, for example, has a similar number. That number varies a little bit, but there is a nuance to that regulation. So when we see a mixed income development that may have 10, 20% as affordable housing and the others that may be just market rate housing, right? I think one of the key features of low-rise density is that it gives you an access to a yard space where you can go outside, have your own time. You're not all the time inside the unit. We want to extend a similar experience, quality of life to those people living in apartments. So that is what is driving this desire to have private amenity space. Now we are saying only 50% of that must be provided in the form of private amenity space. That leaves the door open for all those units that need to be affordable, that really are tight in terms of the cost that they have to incur. They can choose to not provide. But other units who are there in the long term, people who are going to live in these units for many, many years or on a permanent basis, we want to ensure that there is a balance between that, and creation of these private amenities, balconies, patios, rooftops can reduce our dependence on low-rise building fronts, because they offer something that's comparable in terms of quality of life.
So if a building design is brought forward that doesn't meet exactly that criteria, does staff have discretion without having to move it forward to committee?
Yeah, I think that is one of our intents, to have variance, particularly as it relates to affordable housing. And we are increasingly seeing a component of most apartment buildings have that. We will be having options for variances.
The only other observation, and it was noted in one of the letters from Nilton Lynn.
Yes.
I think he used to be on staff. The common amenity space must be barrier-free.
Yes.
Well, I know once you go to a commercial zone, that only applies to the main floor, because you can't, it'd be prohibitive to try to make a barrier-free staircase to a second floor. So I'm wondering if staff would just consider that amendment to making it just on the main floor.
We would take it back for consideration and tighten up that language. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, in regards to the amenity space, we're well aware that depending on the type of product that's being prepared, there might be, reasons why balconies, for instance, couldn't be added, particularly if maybe you're dealing with retrofitting and additions to a historic or older structure where there could be load issues. So it really provides the ability on a site-by-site, case-by-case basis for someone to make the argument of why it can't work, but what are they willing to do in an alternative to make sure that the quality of life in regards to amenity space and particularly good quality usable amenity space is being incorporated for buildings. The main thing we want is to not end up with common space, for instance, that is a couple chairs and an end table, and there's nothing to do or use in the space, as opposed to something that has a bit of a purpose and can be actually enjoyed by the residents.
And I went back to my comment about forcing a design. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from committee? Ann, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just one last question about massing. What in these new proposals for the mid-rise zoning category, encourages more granular development instead of kind of blocky streetscapes?
Eva, do you want to tackle the orientation site design?
So through the chair to you, we are proposing some changes to section 9 of the bylaw, which would be site design requirements. And so this requires orientating the building towards the street, having pedestrian connectivity. All of these things would shift the design and orientation, much like surrounding developments, to create a streetscape and a public realm. And so this would help with the massing in a sense as well. It would align the building better with everything else on the street. It would feel more of part of the street.
I guess I'm thinking more of we don't really have limits on length, or, so we know okay, it can go 21 meters high, which is a bit of a jump from our 11 meters to 21. What if it's high and really long? So I guess I'm wondering, how do we ensure that we don't have streetscapes that are just big, long, like the police building area, on Union Street, where it's kind of this very dire area to walk through as a pedestrian. Yeah.
So I think it's difficult for us to, we don't want to be overly prescriptive, given that
For
we
sure,
don't know what this
100%.
development looks like.
Yep.
I think we have now introduced some language to require some juxtapositioning of materials, for example. We want better defined entrances. So it's that first step towards starting to orient the building, have clear definition of where the entrances are, have some language. I mean, we will now have, take back maybe common amenity space within the building is on ground floor. So it will start to define what that experience is like. We've had a bit more thought to row housing, and sometimes you have this really long row of houses, and appeal of those homes can be questioned. So we are again talking about once you have 4 or 6 units, you either separate it or you stagger it so that building mass, complemented with landscaping
Yeah, I love
makes the
that.
development
Yeah.
a bit more
Yeah,
interesting. So with row housing, which is one of our emphasis focus areas, we've introduced that language. We also have some language that every unit must define its entrances. So you don't have just a beige wall and beige doors, that you are actually taking that effort to define that character, which is the door, the balcony, what may be. So it's an incremental first step towards that direction without being too prescriptive. Again, as we deal with larger rezonings, the Section 59 is still available to us. We want to see and test the acceptance of this initial step. And down the road, following our municipal plan, there will be other opportunities to layer on the success of what we are trying to bring forward today.
Thanks, Pankaj. Yeah, no, I'm happy with that, and I'm really pleased to see a lot of these changes. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other committee members have comments or questions? And I believe what we'll do at this point is we'll ask for a motion to pass with comments as shown from both the public and committee members. Is that what we're looking for tonight?
Yes, so this would be very similar to any other application before you. Staff recommendation, and with our chair letters, we always summarize the key feedback and comments that were brought forward for inclusion in that.
Okay, thank you. So I'm looking for a motion and a seconder. A motion and a seconder. All question? All those in favor? Opposed? And pass. Thank you. That concludes 5.2. Any new business? Boy, to be shocked if there was. Next meeting is December the 10th. And I look for a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting. Jerry. Jerry and Terry. All those in favor? Thank you very much for your time, everybody. This is one of the ones we should have talked about, so we knew what the process, so we will,
Yeah, it's one of those weird things. It's really just the same
yeah.
process. It's just